Can you guys hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Carmel Martin, and I'm the Executive Vice President for Policy here at the Center for American Progress, and it's my honor to welcome you to this very important discussion that we're having today. Today, we face a stark reminder that America's long-standing fault lines around race, gender, and ethnicity remain powerful forces in our nation. The myth that the United States has moved into a post-racial society is debunked on a daily basis. Disparities in race and gender are still everywhere around us, in our economy, in our health care, in our criminal justice system, in our housing, and beyond. Our nation needs to confront these issues head-on, and we must refuse to hide behind stereotypes and coded words that manipulate the conversation and inflame our deepest divisions. We all know that Black women will serve as a critical voice in this conversation, just as they've always done in pushing our nation down the path of progress. Black women have built a strong and powerful legacy of political activism and community engagement. For generations, they've stood at the forefront of movements for social justice, often putting their own lives in harm's way. And yet, despite all they fought for and sacrificed, there's still so much that our country must do for them. Black women continue to suffer a significant pay gap based on their race and gender, earning 16% less than their white female counterparts and 37% less than their white male counterparts. These disparities stifle economic mobility and perpetuate economic insecurity. So today, on Black Women's Equal Pay Day, we've gathered here to demand equality and opportunity across the board, from the workplace to the classroom and everywhere in between. This event is part of CAP's ongoing series, Advancing Racial Justice and the Progressive Agenda in the Era of Donald Trump. In a few moments, our Vice President for Legal Progress, Michelle Jawando, will moderate a panel with 4 incredible leaders who fight every day to empower Black women. But first, I'd like to turn things over to Jocelyn Fry, a senior fellow with CAP's Women's Initiative, who will host a discussion with the incomparable Susan Taylor. Susan has served as a trailblazer in the worlds of business, education, and community activism. She worked for Essence magazine since its founding, while she attended night school and rose to editor-in-chief of the magazine. After her leadership at Essence, Susan founded the National Cares Mentoring Movement. She now works with organizations in 58 cities to train and organize Black volunteers to serve as tutors and role models. Through education and community engagement, CARES helps to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty in African American communities. We're so excited to have her here today, so please join me in welcoming her and Jocelyn to the stage.
Good afternoon. And thank you all for being here. And thank you, Carmel, for that wonderful introduction. And Susan, thank you for being here.
Excited to be with you.
Yes, it's
been a
wonderful.
long time.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And, I have a lot of questions for
Right.
you. And I'm sure the audience does as well. And, I want to start. This is Black Women's Equal Pay Day. There's going to be a lot of discussion about where Black women are, where Black women need to go. And I think the first question I want to ask you is, particularly given not only the work you're doing now, but the work that you've done in the past, where do you think Black women stand at the moment? What's missing from the narrative about women in terms of how well it includes the challenges facing Black women?
Jocelyn, quite honestly, I've stopped looking outward because it's too painful. When you understand that we are the benefactors of the wealth in this nation and throughout the Western Hemisphere, quite frankly, and we can look at our history and see that there's never been a time when Black women or Black people have been included. So I've stopped worrying about that. Looking internally, I look more pointedly at what it is we should be doing so that we are linking arms and aims with an agenda that moves us forward. And I think for Black women, it's to realize that we really do have to speak for ourselves. That was the joy of working with Essence all those many years, the decades, 37 years. I think we've learned how to look good while feeling bad, and we have to learn how to take care of ourselves. It's almost sacrilegious to say that we have to give ourselves to ourselves before we give ourselves away. Because if we do that, when we don't love ourselves and we take care of all the things, the competing pressures that every black woman, no matter where she finds herself, has to deal with, we don't love others well. So I think the most important thing is for us to really have our own agenda and to be clear about what those things are. Maybe I'm looking for a 3-4 point agenda. And then we can have 20 other things that we're working on. But there needs to be what I think about as strategic, a strategic alliance around some things that are really important to us in our community.
You know that I love when you talk about people black women taking care of themselves, and I think it's so important at this moment, particularly since the panel that follows after this is going to talk a lot about black women's activism. And when you think of this moment, and many black women are leading the charge, they're out in their communities, they're doing the work in their communities, and it's they often aren't thinking about themselves. When you hear about black women leading some of the resistance movement and elevating some of the challenges facing the communities, does that surprise you? Is that the role that black women have always been playing in their communities?
I'm a student of history, and this is who we are, and this is what we've done. And a lot of it had to do with our feeling that no one else would speak for us, to us, or defend us. And that's not incorrect. And I think, I'm not an apologist for black men, but we have to understand that, I never met a white man who I was afraid of. And I can remember being on a beach with publishers. Ed Lewis was there, one of the founders of Essence, and Earl Graves, founder of Black Enterprise. And Earl is a very confident, 6'5", big kind of guy, always a lot of humor and sassiness. And, I saw him kind of, not cower, but he shrunk a little bit in front of all these huge white executives in the publishing world. And I asked Ed Lewis, I said, why? And he says, you really don't understand what happens to us in the face of white male power. And it really made me begin to think about the truth of that and how dangerous it has always been for black men to assert themselves. Not that it was less dangerous for us, but when you're wiping somebody's behind and cleaning their homes and you have an ear to everything that's going on, I don't want to sound like I'm apologizing for black men, but black men really couldn't defend us without dying. And when I think about what it must have meant, to have an overseer come and rape your daughter before you, take your wife, take anything from you, but nothing more precious than your relatives, and not be able to do anything about that except die for it. I think that what we have to have is really understanding of our history, why we've had to stand for ourselves, and that we are at a crossroads right now. And I think with all the white papers and the information and the conferences and the seminars, we have to realize that we're not a monolithic group. Never have been. And that we're united by our race and our gender, black women are, but we're also separated by class and color and and sexual identity and other things that we allow to get in the way. Can we be the generations? Can we be the generations that really heal that? And I think that we have way showers. Mary McLeod Bethune was a way shower for that. Melanie Campbell is here, and I always look at Melanie when I think of Dr. Dorothy Height. Dr. Dorothy Height, with all of that education and elegance. I always thought of her as a steel fist in a velvet glove. But travel with Dr. Dorothy, and you would see, grassroots sisters, in the Delta, and then the high and mighty. She brought the high and the humble together. This is what Melanie Campbell does. If you look at the work that Melanie does around the country, and I've traveled with her, it's like everybody is at the table, and that's what we really, through our sororal and certainly fraternal organizations as well, but our women's organizations, we cannot forget working class, women and women who really are just jobless, homeless, hopeless, returning citizens who are struggling along the margins. This is the work that I'm really dedicated to.
Can you talk more about that? Because I know you're working a lot on issues around poverty, particularly with young people, and I want to talk more about that. And I want to pick up on the theme that you just raised, particularly when you look at young women. What do you say to them about that history, about Dr. Haidt and Dr. Bethune, and that legacy of slavery that still persists even to this day? What do you say to young women, young black women that you run into about the importance of that history and the relevance of that history today?
Jocelyn, I find myself speaking less and showing more videos. Truly, because, you could speak all day about the importance of the vote. You could speak to young women all day about the importance of, I think there's a circumspect way, that young girls should present themselves. So what I'll do, I can read 500, 1,000 youngsters. Rather than telling them to go out to vote at Harlan High in Chicago where we're working, Oprah Winfrey and Ava DuVernay made available Selma. And so they watched Selma, and they then had to take the test that Oprah had to take in order to qualify as a voter. And they were like, oh my goodness, there's no way that we will never, ever, ever miss an opportunity to vote. So that particular film did what would have taken us, a didactic presentation would never have gotten them there. And in speaking to young women, as I do on college campuses now and again, not that I'm doing it as much as I used to, but I always ask men in the audience, this is what I do about, because you look on college campuses and you see everybody's got hair swinging across their behinds and their breasts are out. I'm like, on a college campus? And jeans so tight. So I always say, okay, to the brothers, let me ask you if you've ever left a woman because she wouldn't have sex with you. Because a lot of young women, based on what we have allowed to be what they digest before they go to school, and what they see on reality television, it's like, you're supposed to have sex. That's my power. That's what a lot of young women feel. So I would say to them, to the men, have you ever left a woman because she wouldn't have sex with you? If you have, raise your hand. Not a hand has ever gone up. I said, well, would you take a woman who is like, showing her breast and dressed in a way that I think is inappropriate, and I'm of a different generation, and I was just laughing about the way that we used to show up in the 60s. I'm probably the oldest one in this room. And they said, no, not to my mom. I take her to bed, and maybe I want to put a bag over her head in the morning. This is what men would say, but I'm not taking her home to be my mother. So women need to hear those kinds of things from men who they believe. And I'll say, do you want to come back to a reunion and look around and say, oh, I slept with, Lord have mercy, that one and that one and the other one. And I talk about self-pleasuring. You have to learn how to pleasure yourself. Because wanting sex and bowing to that with the wrong person, brothers coming out of incarceration, bringing AIDS into the community, it's still the #1 killer of young black women. Can kill you. So I speak less, tell more stories, and show more videos, and also just remind not only young women, but all of us, that this is not the rough side of the mountain. That we have a privilege that we don't even really understand what it costs, what this arrival cost us. We have to keep our minds focused on that, because then the everyday doesn't seem as challenging as it might be.
Why did you, after the wonderful legacy at Essence, why did you feel a need to start a mentoring initiative, and particularly an effort to mobilize African American mentors in particular? What was happening? What was the priority? What were the issues you thought you needed to address?
I thought I knew, because Marion Wright Edelman is actually absolutely my shero. And after Katrina, everybody knows that Essence has an amazing music festival in New Orleans, and after Katrina just, flooded the city, and we saw parents leave and young people abandoned. This is what stress will do to you. No person who is in his or her right mind just leaves a kid or hurts a kid, wounds a kid, rapes a child. This is mental illness. This is stress that is overwhelming that we have to understand. And I said to the Essence family, we just can't go back, and have a big old party. But everything that I did at Essence always had a deeper purpose. I just think we're in a spiritual crisis, and that explains why we've lost our way, the whole nation, the whole world. And so I said, let's launch Essence Cares, and that's what we did. We launched Essence Cares, and it was a call to the community to get involved. Go back to your respective towns, cities, and mentor our young, our fragile, vulnerable young. And I naively believed that, just putting out that call to action and putting celebrities in front of the community, thousands, hundreds of thousands for 3 days, it would happen. And I realized that an infrastructure needed to be created. And so that gave birth to Atlanta Cares, and now we're in 58 cities from Seattle down to San Diego and Boston, Cambridge, down to Miami. And it's a call to action. Also, Jocelyn, I need to mention that when the call for mentors is issued, it's white women who are the first responders, and then white men, then black women and black men. It's not that we don't care, but before the National Cares Mentoring Movement, there really wasn't a catchment in our community. There wasn't that call to action to us. People use our children as the poster children for the pain, but those organizations, as we well know, are not often run by us. So this is what we're doing all across the country, not just recruiting mentors. I showed up at a school in South Florida. I think I mentioned this to you. I saw these young girls. Seagull is the school, 300 young women, pregnant or parenting. Youngest was 12 with 3 children, and no one was arrested. And I saw them wrestling book bags and baby bags and car seats and babies onto school buses. And I said, we're not going to leave the recovery and forward movement of our children to anybody outside of our race. We need allies, but we have to be in the forefront. And that's when we began building programs. So we have the Rising, Elevating Education Expectations and Self-Esteem. And let me just say a bit about that. People come up to me every day and say, Essence changed my life. And the stories, we hear the stories, some of you may feel that way. Or I read your editorials, or I read books, or Jan Van Zandt in Essence, and we introduced Jan Van Zandt. Well, if a magazine can change lives, if a book can change your life, if we go to worship service or a conference or even this gathering and we're learning, I want to be down there taking notes when our sisters come up here to speak. If a magazine can change your life, why can't we enter schools? Because they're not going to allow you to change curricula so swiftly and tell your history. Because if we knew the history, what would happen? We'd be the victors. And the victors would be the villains. Columbus would come down and Toussaint would go up. That's just what it would be, And so I just said, we're going to go and really try to create a consciousness shifting protocol that's in a group format and transform the entire school. So that's our model, going into a school, working with the entire student body in wellness mentoring circles that are single gender identified and also very intimate, 30 in a classroom, and then all school auditorium sessions that really speak life into our young and give them a roadmap to self-sustainability and what it means to be a strong, satisfied, and happy black woman and man.
Well, one of the things, and you touched on this earlier, I think one of your initiatives focuses on healing. And healing in the African American community. And when the first thing I think about when I think of Essence is I think about in the spirit, and I think about the emphasis that you often bring to sort of thinking about body, mind, and spirit. Not only just thinking clearly, but just having your soul right. Can you talk a little bit about why you think healing is so important at this moment and what that means to you? What is it that you think you need to do to sort of promote that spirit of healing?
There is an intergenerational trauma that we host. We may look like we're all dressed up and looking fabulous in here today, but that intergenerational trauma of being disregarded, disrespected, demonized, brutalized, heinous acts of violence committed against us is in our DNA. It's there. And it's unnamed, it's unrecognized, and it's unhealed. And it's the reason that we don't work well together. You can't, we haven't sustained any movement since the Montgomery bus boycott. And there's a reason for that. You know, we're in community. I'm always talking to my people about this. And this is what I did at Essence every single Tuesday in my office. This is why we're here. We have to put out, because I don't always get it right. I may say something that offends somebody. Don't call your mama, don't call your man, don't call your girlfriend, don't talk about me in the cubicle. Come on in my office, sit down, let me apologize so we can move on. Because this is really about putting the reins of power in the hands of black women so that we can uplift our community. So I think that there's a deep healing that we need, that we don't recognize, that we paint over, we polish over, we gloss over, and it ruins relationships. And you see it in our lack of self-care and self-regard. And this is what our curriculum really does. We do it with our mentors so that we're not looking down on young people who speak differently than we do, whose hair we find strange, you know, and with our and we can move beyond classism. We're doing it with our men because it's as difficult to help some black men understand sexism as it is to help white people understand racism. And so our trainings go deep. They start with heritage and move on to spirituality and go on to community and wealth building. I have fabulous bags, but they're all fakes. I am not giving anybody $1,000 for a pocketbook. You know, and I know my team, this jacket, it's so beautiful. Isn't it lovely? Custom made, but I wear it all the time. You know, I say it's not a fashion show. So that's the healing that we have to do, because what we do is we buy things we can't afford and we don't need. And it's like more. And we don't even have a place for those things. Oh, I got my stuff stored over there. You don't have a place for that? You don't need it? So I go in the store, that's a cute little thing, but I don't really need it. I wear the same 3 things all the time. I have a closet full of clothes. So it's really, the healing is our coming home to ourselves. I think Audre Lorde said it so brilliantly as she told us that that learning or loving had been beaten and taken out of us over the centuries. And what we're trying to do is really learn how to love again. And it's a charity, as my mother would say, that begins at home.
You know, you mentioned classism, and I want to go back to that point because I think when we first started, you talked about Dr. Haidt and some of those luminaries and their ability to bring together folks who perhaps thought that their lives were very different. You know, people who were very elite and perceived as elite that had high levels of education, with folks who, maybe never even made it out of high school. And I think about that challenge now, particularly, as Black women, how do we forge those alliances when folks are not living in the same community? When my parents talked about growing up and living in D.C., everybody was in the same community, and now folks are all spread out. What do you say to try to pierce beneath that class barrier that sometimes is even just as pronounced as all these other barriers, to really forge that relationship between young Black women, older Black women, folks in the middle who maybe don't think they have a lot in common? What do you say to try to break through that?
Powerful and important question, Jocelyn. I say your privilege is just the accident of your birth, that you happen to be born to Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, lived on that side of town. What a gift, And then I think, there's a lack of awareness. Do you know how our federal government defines poverty? Extreme poverty is defined as a household income of $12,129 annually for a family of 4 with 2 related children. So when you say that to affluent and middle class people, they're like, what? We spent that on vacation, $12,000, and that sets people who are struggling in poverty up for criminal behaviors. Because you have to sell something in order to live, in order to eat. So it's really awareness, understanding, and having people understand that beyond our view, beyond our middle class view, there is intersecting pain that is caused by poverty. It's being exposed to hunger. In Chicago, there are certain shelters you can only stay in for 3 weeks, so you have to move. So the kids are moving from school to school. Hunger. Few of us in this room have ever been really hungry. unrelenting violence, to hear gunshots all night long, to be fearful, to step in classrooms with 3 third graders who Bob Listenby who was at the Department of Justice said third graders said that they didn't know anybody, none of them, all of them rather, knew someone who had been shot. So what I'm saying is that there's a world beyond our view where people are struggling and suffering that we don't see and that is unknown to us. And we don't have to enter that world. We don't have to go up in the projects. I lived around the corner from them, and my building was no better than. My family, they weren't invited in. My mother tried to get into the projects, but they didn't. You weren't allowed to come in there. You know, we didn't get that benefit. You know, back there then in the 40s and then the 50s. And so what we're trying to do is open people's compassionate hearts and say, you go to church, and what are you doing? You're praying up in the church, and you're raising $25,000 for Pastor's 25th anniversary. But the children around the corner in the schools don't have books and don't have computers. And the teachers aren't trained to really educate them well, because being in our under-resourced schools is a punishment, not a privilege for teachers, you know? So it's an awareness that we have to insist on, and I think that push has to come from the pews toward the pulpit. We cannot recover our children and our communities without our faith community's involvement. And I was saying, I'm so happy that I was just on Capitol Hill with Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner and ministers last week, as they really not stormed the Hill, but we walked the Hill and met with many of the senators' policy people to really talk about, you know, the Affordable Care Act and the importance of not dismantling it. I think one of the most important things is for us to be able to speak to people without making them wrong. You know, without making them feel like, you know, you're causing us pain. This is the truth of the history of this nation. We're not blaming you, but it's all of our responsibility to own it and correct it, so we can all sing America the Beautiful. Look at what happened to when I met Jocelyn, she was actually chief of staff for Michelle Obama. Policy director.
Let's not dethrone Tina.
Oh, no, was Tina there when I came?
No.
This is the first administration. Okay, well, you know what your title was, so let me not try to correct it. See what
Don't
we
get me
black
in
women
trouble.
will do? You know, we can correct anybody. But you really, I mean, I lost my thought, but at any rate.
It was a good time. It would be nice to go back to that. Yeah. I know we have an interest in taking questions. We're just going to take 2 questions. But Susan, thank you so much for being here. I could talk to you all day.
I could talk all day.
But you have such wonderful insights, and I think provided really a lot of provocative ideas and thoughts for us in the next panel. But thank you for being here. But do we have a couple of questions? Yes, this young lady.
Thank you very much for an inspirational talk. I think that around the room you have a lot of black women who have accomplished things in their lives. We're all diverse. How can we get involved in some of the things you're doing in terms of mentorship? How can we help and play a role in that? Thank you.
Well, we're in 58 cities. We're not everywhere where there's a critical need. But you can help us by bringing your best self to the wellness mentoring circles that we're creating. You can help us by mentoring our children. That's really what we need. All across the country, we're recruiting able people, and we're training them, you know, to be culturally competent. Not every black person understands the power and importance and beauty in being black. And that's what we're sowing into our young ones, what we're trying to instill in them. You know, for them to understand that their present circumstances don't define their future. So we need mentors. And we're doing it in a group format. So I could say one of the things you can do is go to our website, you know, caresmentoring.org, and get involved. You could join the board. If you're living here in D.C., we have a phenomenal leader, Roxana Bilal, National Capital Area Cares. If you go on the website, you'll see where we are all across the country. That's where, of course, you can donate. You know, I tell you what I'm doing now. I'm just tired of begging foundations for money. You know, I really am. It has worn me, and we've done well. It has worn me out. So I'm looking for a social entrepreneurial opportunity, and I found it in Cleveland. And I hope that we're going to really be able to bring that to a place, Jocelyn, where we're creating the replicable model for the rising that transforms whole schools, that takes the university for parents, where you have young people who've been incarcerated, they're returning citizens, they have felony charges, they feel like they can't get jobs. We're speaking life into them without blame or shame, you know, and helping them to really now transform their lives. 40 community partners, getting them job ready, entrepreneurial ready, and helping them know that they can create self-sustaining families and communities. So you can help us with that. You can come and work with us on the board. We need board members at our local affiliates to really help raise money and help really strengthen our programs. So, caresmentoring.org.
One more question.
Morning. Oh, afternoon. So my name is Marcia, and you speak with a lot of authority. And for someone that's just starting her career and who also wants to make change, is there any advice for me or for anybody really in the room?
Well, I sound like do I speak with authority? Interesting. You don't see the insecurities we all have. You know, I was terrified today. I'm always terrified before I speak. And it makes you do your homework and think critically about what you're going to say and not, you know. Okay, what I wanted to say, what I would say to all you young women is buy property. You know, invest your money in something so that there's no noose around your neck when you find yourself in any circumstance, whether it's a relationship or it's employment that doesn't satisfy and honor you, that you have options. You lose your voice when you feel you don't have options. I would say to all of us, no matter our gender or our age, that each of us is really a divine original, and you're here for a particular purpose. We lose our power by comparing ourselves to one another. I want to be like Oprah. Well, you know, or I want to be you. You don't want to be me? Ask me about my life. Ask me about the hours that I work. Ask me about the family that doesn't get to see me. So the most important thing, I think, is to ask yourself, you know, why am I here? What is it I'm supposed to give to life? Not what am I trying to get from life? What am I to give from life? I would say to young people, choose your partners carefully. Nothing can derail you more quickly than having the wrong person at a front row seat in your life. You know, you have to ask yourself, does this person deserve me? Does this person deserve me? And, you know, move beyond the accoutrement, what he or she looks like and what they have. I mean, I'm so tired of sisters telling me, I can't go out with that. We're not equally yoked. You have to be equally yoked. If you're looking for love, that's what's on the inside. The accoutrement, I'm 71. I don't look like I did when I was your age, young and fluffy, you know? Nobody's trying to like hit on a 71-year-old. So you don't, you know, when you're young and round, and this is a whole other thing. I always say I'm glad I didn't have a big old behind, because I wouldn't have known how to handle it, you know? People would have wanted me and I would have wanted them back. Nobody was looking at long live. If they wanted me, it was for who I was on the inside. And so you make your choices that way. Pick somebody who you know loves you for who you are, not the body that you have or your hair or your color or anything that is superficial that's here today and gone tomorrow. Critical thinking, meditation, listening to your own breath, not being afraid to raise your voice as you did. What are you talking about? I have a strong voice, or I seem like I'm an empowered person. You're the only other person who raised her hand. That's confidence, you know? Don't worry about being right or wrong. Just be yourself. Your divine, right, unique, and amazing self. Because if you don't bring your gifts to fruition, then something is missing in the world, and that's the problem. We were saying we're in a spiritual crisis. Because we are black women. What do? When we shrink back from life. I'm too old. I'm too fat. I'm too dark. I hate my hair. Look at my skin. Oh, everything is wrong about me. You're a divine original. Stop cursing that big belly out. Just eat right, put on your sneakers, walk, get yourself fit, because we cannot win with a broken army. You know, not all of us are supposed to be a size whatever. We're each a divine original. Learn to love what God made you and make the best of it. I just want to say, look in that mirror. I think it's so important to look in the mirror and just say, I love you. Say it to yourself. I love you. Look at you, you fabulous, fabulous woman or man. Bring the best of who you are every day to what you do and learn. I'm frustrated because I want to go back to school. You know, I want to learn more. I want to do more, understand more. So those are some of the things that I would say, how you, and you know what? You never arrive. There's no arrival. There's no arrival. When you arrive is when we're standing around saying, that was a good sister. That was a good sister. And I want to say one other thing, because the thing that derails us, and it derailed me, is depression. You know, it's stress, it's loss, it's feeling that, you know, the person you loved or the illness that comes or the job you should have had or whatever is gone. Life makes no mistakes. Life makes no mistakes. And when in your saddest moments, there are times you just need to lay in the bed and just say, I'm going to weep today, I'm going to look at the ceiling, and then tomorrow I got to get up. Tomorrow you have to get up. If you need medication, take it. You know, but I think that going inside and asking this profound question, it's the most important question that I ask myself when I'm in pain. What have you come to teach me? And then listen. What have you come to teach me? This loss, the pain in my stomach, acid reflux, eat it earlier, the tears rolling down your cheeks, you're hooked up with the wrong person, whatever it is, you know? What have you come to teach me? And then understand that and begin to orchestrate your life in a way that responds to that. Let me learn that lesson so I can go on to the next pain and learn that lesson. And my prayer is like, Lord, let me learn the lessons without my face having to hit the floor.
Thank you so much. You are wonderful. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your words of inspiration and you know, really helping us to kick off a wonderful conversation about Black women. Before we step off the stage, I want to do one bit of housekeeping. Michelle Giwando, who's our VP for Legal Progress, is going to come up to the stage with the really terrific panel that we have. So we're going to do a bit of a stage change, but sit tight, because we're going to just pick up where we left off. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Susan, for joining us and really just giving a wonderful advice and thoughts about how we operate in this moment, and giving us the benefit of your wisdom. We really, really appreciate it.
What have you come to teach me? Woo! I hope you wrote it down. Did you write it down? All right. What have you come to teach me? It is. Brendan, get the mic up. Brendan, are we ready to go? Mic on. Good afternoon. Can I just say that I have never seen this room look so good before? And I think that has extra color with the people in it. So thank you. There's a little bit of some extra.
Their mic is hot.
All right, so let me get to this panel because it is an amazing and dynamic panel. I'm really excited. There's so many friends here, and I know we have a lot of people following on live stream. So let's get right into it. Tracy Sturdivant, come on up here. Melanie Campbell, come on down. Janae Ingram and Alencia Johnson. I will do a proper introduction of my friends, but wanted to get them on the stage first. I am Michelle Giwando. I have the honor and privilege of serving as our Vice President for Legal Progress and our co-host for the Center for American Progress podcast called Thinking Cap. We are trying to bring back critical thinking. Amen. How about that? But I am joined here today with really some Everybody on here is actually my friend, mentor, big sister. So I'm so thankful for each of them. Alencia Johnson is the Director of Constituency Communications at Planned Parenthood Action Fund. She has done it all, was at the Obama campaign in 2012 and leading corporate communications. So we are so happy that she is here. Next to her is another amazing girlfriend, Janae Ingram. She is the Director of National Partnerships at Airbnb and was the national organizer and current board member for the Women's March. Prior to her role with the March and at Airbnb, she was the National Executive Director of the National Action Network, the organization led by Reverend Al Sharpton. Next to her is two of my big sisters coming up here, Melanie Campbell. She is the president and CEO of the National Coalition on National Black Civic Participation, and she is the convener. What do you know about the power of convening, right? She is the convener of the Black Women's Roundtable and has for decades, particularly under the tutelage of the late, great Dr. Hyde, brought together Black women's organizations and advocates working all on our behalf. And last but definitely not least is none other than Tracy Sturdivant, who is the co-founder and co-executive director of Make It Work. How you know we make it work, ladies. And for the last 20 years has really worked to strengthen democracy in all its effects. This is a super exciting panel. It is a great day. As you know, today is Black Women's Equal Pay Day, which is the day that marks the day in the year which Black women would have had to work to catch up last year in 2016 to their white male colleagues. So 7 months into the year, Black women have had to work to catch up to what our white male colleagues made last year. And we thought that this would just be a great opportunity to just start a conversation about Black women's role in the age of Trump, in the age of the resistance as we hear. And so I want to start with a broad question that I would like each of you to take. And so the question I want to say or begin with is we have a lot of conversation right now about progressivism and the future of the political parties, whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. But how do you as a Black woman show up each day in your work, and what is the value of you being there at the table?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. And Michelle, big sister of mine, thank you for bringing us all together today. I think I'm going to keep it real. How do I show up every day in the day of Trump? I like to say I'm part of the 94% that tried to save America. And we say that, and it's, we all say that and we laugh about it. But the reality is, at this point, I think it's important for us as Black women to remind folks that the resistance for us, the resistance as everybody's talking about it, it's not new for Black women. Historically, we have led movements while we are continuously the most oppressed. And so I find that inner strength. And also I push and challenge my organizations I work with. How about we try something new? How about we actually let Black women lead and be at the decision-making tables, not just for the strategy, but also where are the dollars? Right, where are the dollars going in order to free our people and also center that around the Black women's experience? I work at Planned Parenthood and healthcare, including Planned Parent access to healthcare at Planned Parenthood is on the chopping block. We had a small win, I would say, on Friday morning about 2:00 in the morning, but we can't stop because they're going to try to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which has closed the insurance gap for African Americans by 1/3. But even within that, there's a defunding of Planned Parenthood. And I like to always remind folks that access to reproductive health care is a matter of life or death for Black women. When you reduce access to reproductive health care, the maternal mortality rates for Black women goes up, we are already 3 to 4 times more likely to die giving birth. And I believe that we are the life givers of this world. And that actually, the number is higher for educated Black women. So we might have access to great doctors or health insurance. It's higher for Black women than it is for educated Black women than it is for white women who don't have any education. So those are just a few reminders that I like to bring into every single day. And then something that Ms. Taylor mentioned, self-care is so important at this time for us because we are the life givers and the fighters and the leaders, but we also have some healing that we have to do and be unapologetic about that self-care.
Yeah, self-care. I'm a big proponent of self-care. So hi everyone, it's great to be in this room looking at all of your wonderful faces. I see so many friends here today. Hi Dara. So many friends. In my 9 to 5, because I feel like so many of us, there are multiple hats. And in my 9 to 5, working with Airbnb is something that's new. And you know, as you read my bio, I probably have more experience as an activist, and people probably recognize that part of me more than the corporate tech part of me. And yet, Airbnb fully embraces the activist part of me. I think, you know, that was something that actually helped me win them over. The fact that I was someone who has strong ties to the community and strong ties to fighting for the community has been something that has actually helped a lot in my work. So I just started with them, I guess, 4.5 months ago, so I'm still fairly new. But last week, we actually announced a huge partnership, and I see Claudia Withers here, with NAACP, which is going to allow for rev sharing, which is a huge opportunity, something that is revenue sharing. So basically, NAACP will be a partner of ours. They will help us expand the opportunities that exist from home sharing. Some of you, how many people in here have ever tried Airbnb? First, let's start with that. Okay, so a good number. How many of you have never heard of Airbnb, and it's okay to raise your hand? Okay, we got a couple. Okay, I appreciate the honesty because not everyone knows what Airbnb is. So Airbnb is basically a platform that allows for home sharing. So if you have an extra room in your house, or if you decide you want to travel for a weekend, you can list your house and let other people stay there. And so there's a huge economic opportunity that comes from that. For me, it's funny because I posted today, earlier today, not necessarily because of this panel, but just sort of thinking about some of the conversations I've had with people being like, so you're at Airbnb now, like how does that work? How did you go from NAN and planning the Women's March to being at Airbnb? And it really was through learning about the company that drew me to the company. Laura Murphy, who is a mentor and a friend of mine who used to be at the ACLU, was working with them, Black woman, who was working with them around the discrimination issues that they were having last year, actually asked me. And when she asked me, so prior to that, I had left NAN in 2015, and I was in my self-care, a full 9 months of self-care, what I like to call my rebirthing moment, because it was a full 9 months of like
Claiming
me.
your time.
Absolutely. I'm reclaiming my time, yes.
Yes.
I did all of that. I reclaimed my time and basically took 9 months.
If you don't know, check out Auntie Maxine.
Yes, please. Check out Auntie Maxine. But took 9 months of like traveling and spending time with my family, just reprioritizing the things that meant something to me. And so when Laura approached me, I was like, okay, sure, yeah, okay. Like, not really considering it, but just kind of like, sure, I'm open to anything at this point. And it was upon learning about the company that I was like, okay, this actually is an opportunity that I'm interested in, because it would allow me to connect communities that I care about with the availability of earning additional income to stay in their homes. Yes, the economic opportunity that existed was something that I was like, oh my God, like I traveled on Airbnb, but I didn't really think about what it meant, not just for the host, but also for the broader community.
Okay, let me put a pin on that, because
Sure.
I want to come back, particularly on Equal Pay Day
Yes.
for Black women, to the economic question.
Absolutely.
Mel.
I was listening. I was like, I gotta go sit out in the audience. Thank you all for the invitation. Well, for me, coming into this work where I spend most of my waking hours, my sleeping hours, my in-between hours, trying to figure out how I can make sure Black women are fully respected in this world, right? And how I came to that was really working in corporate America, working in the movement, working in the civil rights space, love brothers, right? But it was just always there's always this yearning to figure out how to break through so many glass ceilings, even within our own community, right? Just straight up, no chaser, right? And being able to figure that out. And I remember where I got into a place where I was like, I'm sick of this. I'm out. I'm getting out of DC. I'm out of here. And I had a conversation with Dr. Hype. And she said, well, what is it you want to do? Because there are times when you really don't know what you want to do. And that's okay, because I changed careers 3 or 4 times, in my life. Believe it or not, as long as I've been here, right? I was hopping jobs. Hey, y'all folks, it's nothing new. Okay. Hey, I can stay here for a couple hours. I'm out, next job. It's okay. But when I had this conversation in 1995, maybe, I don't know, days of meshing. And she said, well, what is it you want to do? No, it was 2005. What is it you want to do? I said, well, I really want to figure out how to, because this was post-Katrina. And in that process of having to go, where we had done a lot of voter empowerment work and done all this work over the years and over the decades, for those who know Coalition Operation Big Vote days, that far back. And having to really work with Black women who were really having to become activists when they weren't looking to become activists, who were struggling in so many different ways. And anyway, so the short story is that we had this conversation. So what did you want to do? I said, I want to figure out how to empower. Well, why can't you do that where you are? So the birth of having 2 titles of work in the same space really came to be for me. And in that process of doing the work, really finding out and being in the progressive space of people always saying they can't find Black folks, let alone Black women who have this or that or the other. So the idea of trying to figure out a way to make sure that we can help you find that binder full of Black women who are experts in so many arenas, kind of helped birth the idea of our report. There wasn't enough information out there around research about Black women by the voices of Black women became a part of that. The other was the power that we have as a vote, right? And being able to take that and benefit for not just ourselves, but for our communities. And so, i.e., the power of the sister vote, being able to claim it. I have to see it, right? And being able to say, this is where we are. I do believe there's a need for us to also, like some of the things that we've got to figure out how to leverage that in a different kind of way. So I have a new coin phrase, y'all know, it's like we have to power shift. We're in this moment now where none of us, I won't say, some of us expected it because of what was happening in the election, but that's another panel.
Oh no, that's coming up next. That's a question I got next.
Oh, it's another panel.
Yeah,
But the reality about being in this space that we're in now, how very important it is that we unify and respect that everybody that's at the table has something to bring to the table. And that is a concern I have right now, because when you're in, when we're in an uncharted territory, sometimes people tend to do things that they wouldn't normally do. So that's a concern.
So we launched this campaign called Make It Work back in 2014, and that seems like such a long time ago. Oh, yes. Time ago. At that time, there had been wins across states around sort of economic justice issues. Minimum wage and paid family leave bills were, being voted on and winning in red states and blue states. There was potentially a self-professed champion of women getting ready to run for the presidency. Didn't quite know, is she gonna run, not gonna And we knew that the women's vote was going to continue to be a coveted vote in the upcoming presidential election. And we looked at it as a unique opportunity to put the issues of women and their economic security and justice front and center in the run-up to the presidential election. I like to call them pocketbook issues. These are the issues that we all wake up in the morning worrying about. And so we set off to really try to do a shift in how people talked about those issues, be it how media covered it, how organizers covered it when we knocked on people's doors. Instead of going and saying, hey, would you vote for candidate X? It was, hey, how do you make it work? And from there, we got a series of people from, different backgrounds to really be a part of our campaign, volunteering and organizing to get other people who were, waking up in the morning and experiencing the sort of same kind of economic insecurity to organize themselves, from house parties and kitchen table conversations to training people on how to caucus and getting them to vote on these issues: equal pay, paid family leave, affordable child care. And so we talked to folks in the run-up to the election and tried to make sure those issues were actually covered in the election. And they were talked about. And then the election happened. And so I've been doing a lot of reflecting on what do we need to do differently to ensure, while Black women did turn out and we were the ones who actually showed up, there was still a whole lot who didn't.
That's right.
Yeah. 50% of the population did not vote.
Right.
So what are we doing wrong? What are we doing when we know that economic insecurity is high on everybody's list, particularly people of color and women, who are not just the backbones of the electorate, but backbones of our community, backbones of our home. And it's really bringing me to this place where, while we can talk to them about these issues, you can't talk to a woman about the need for affordable child care and policy around that and not talk to her about her making sure that her child can walk down the street and not be shot, right? And if we can't figure out how to talk about intersectionality from a real place in people's hearts and what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, we're going to continue to get where we're getting. We're going to continue to have the instability that we're seeing in communities. And so my energy right now has been around, how do we actually talk about intersectionality in a way that allows us to look at the whole person and their whole experience and what it means to talk to folks, because that, we can talk about resistance, but if we can't talk about how people are experiencing this from a day-to-day basis, the resistance will continue. It can't be about opposing something. We have to be for something. And the only way we can do that is to talk about people's day-to-day lives and their whole person.
Let me jump in and stay right there. I often tell people I am 5'9" with a Nigerian last name and Caribbean roots. As a Black woman, when I walk into the room, there's some resistance, okay? Because most of the time, it's usually just me. And I want to stay there thinking about kind of our roles, particularly with policymakers and political parties. Jocelyn Fry and I just released a piece on the leveraging the concerns and the policy needs of Black women, but we often are also seeing this shortage between parties. Melanie, you were a part of a letter to the Democratic National Committee saying, listen, as we're doing postscripts of the 2016 election, there's a lot of conversation about white working class, and really when you say that, white men in the working class, and the most consistent component of that Obama coalition, Black women, there's been little analysis, outreach, conversation. What's up with that? Now, we can have a whole nother conversation about the Trump administration and the Republican Party, but I do want to stay with that kind of theme. What are we seeing policymakers and politicians and political parties, how do they think about Black women? Because I will say many of us feel taken for granted over and over. And anybody can jump into that.
Well, we make them nervous. Ooh, you're making me nervous. As Jeff Sessions said when Senator Harris was asking him simple questions that he should have been able to answer, right? I think that it's really challenging in this moment where we know that we have been the backbone of the electorate, particularly on the progressive side, that there's this conversation about trying to aggregate and engage others. If I were the owner of a championship,
professional sports league, like, I would be trying to make sure LeBron is not trying to leave, right, instead of looking at the other 3 players who did not bring me that championship. So I think it's really challenging in this moment for the conversations that have emerged around which voters are we trying to engage, and how we actually respect the participation and the leadership and the opportunity that it means to invest in your star player. And we're not seeing that at the level that I think reflects our participation rates, be it within the party system or how that's actually showing up, whether it's Sister Maxine and others who are actually showing up and are the voice of the resistance right now.
Well, okay.
Which hat
It's about to get real, right?
We're just gonna talk melody. I'm on lunch break, which is engaging the party. I'm on lunch break, right? And several of us on lunch break. Young sisters reached out to me and asked me to sign a letter, and I did. Part of, I think, which is why I say rather than say leverage, it's about shifting and being able to really get serious about understanding that we have to challenge the party apparatuses, not just the Democratic Party.
Right.
So really looking at, okay, what is it that keeps allowing folks to take our vote, and then we end up on the other side of that vote with our issues not being addressed. So Susan talked about it. Introspectively, we need to get together, and many are, right, getting together, but really challenging. We'll start with the Democratic Party. It's not just the DNC.
Right.
It's a Democratic Congressional Committee.
Yes.
It's a Democratic Governors Association. It's a Democratic Senatorial Committee. It's all of those. It's the connecting points that go towards that party. It's the entities that are outside of that party. And really being able to figure out how we challenge that so that because bottom line is, if I vote for you, I want to get something out of it. And we're not getting that. And quite frankly, it didn't just start because a certain person lost.
Right.
It's been going on. And so for me, who wear this nonpartisan 501c3 hat that I wear, I'm just talking as an analyst. That we have to challenge that. I don't want to just go over there and meet with one person and say, okay, you're going to figure it out. We need to look at who else do we need to talk to? Who are the people who are, in the most case, respectfully, reality is mostly white men who are the ones making the decision
Right.
and making the influence on who gets targeted, right? And so how do we change that perspective? Then internally, there was something that was started a few years back called Future PAC, that for whatever reasons, started out and then it died. We also have to figure out how and the late Dr. Ron Walls always tell us, he who funds your politics controls your politics.
That's right.
So what are we doing differently about that? And in my time at the National Coalition, and even in my partisan days, understanding that when things were different and we were leveraging that, we also had a different way of how we funded our politics. We weren't waiting around for somebody else to write that check. I'm just saying that reality. And if you need me, then we figure out a way how to collectively demand that if you need my vote, you're going to pay for that too, right? And we've got some work to do. One of the things that'll be coming out, commercial, right? We do our poll again with Essence. It's coming out September. I actually know what it is, but I can't tell y'all because it's embargo. I got the results a few minutes ago, and I can tell you, be there September 20th, right? Because it's going to tell some different stories. And I'll say the research that we have done in the past is just, that's moving forward in the sense that we are not loyal to any party. I'm telling folks in those meetings that I've gone to, look, sisters are in a different space. We had some good days under President Obama, but we had some bad days under President Obama. And doggone it if we're going to just continue down that road when our children's lives are at stake. Our own lives are at stake with what's going on in some of these buildings.
Okay.
Right?
All right. We'll keep it there.
Okay.
We'll keep it there. Janae.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think when you asked the question, the thing that I immediately thought is black women are ignored. Absolutely. And that is from both parties. We cast the most votes in one party, and we get
95%
turnout. And we get ignored. Our issues get ignored. Nothing that we want is paid attention to, and the other party just ignores us. Just de facto ignores us. They don't think they can win our vote. And so they don't even try. And so it's one of those things that, you know, we have to realize our political power. We have the power to say to one party or the other, like, we're up for grabs. We shouldn't be giving our vote to anyone unless they've earned it. And that's the thing that I feel like we keep doing over and over and over again. We are loyal and get nothing for that loyalty. And yet we continue to be loyal and expect to see different results. We need to go back to being unbought and unbossed. We need to be funding each other. We need to be running for office. We need to be showing up when there's an issue. All of this is part of the process. And until we realize that we control the power, we control them, we'll continue to see the same results, which is being ignored.
So I want to talk about that, because I think we as Black women, there's a lot of research and data that we tend to be over consumers of social media. And we find ourselves in a moment where we can both create content as well as give out content. I'm thinking about Ava DuVernay. You think about Beyonce. I know there's some Beyonce fans. There's always Beyonce fans in whatever room you walk in. But we often see kind of the same disrespect or snubbing of even our very prominent African American women. I'm thinking about everyone is still asking the question, why wasn't Selma nominated? And you see 13th, Ava's latest project, getting some of the accolades, but there's still very much a question about what happened with Selma and even Beyonce. And we can think about others, even Maxine Waters. You know, we affectionately call her Auntie Max, but we think about the moments where there have been a number, Bill O'Reilly making fun of who she is as a senior stateswoman in our party. So how do we deal with even the most prominent among us with what we would consider some degree of privilege, still dealing with those issues of being snubbed or belittled or kind of that invisibility for our work and our value? And Tracy, I know you mentioned something backstage. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I've been talking about just the power of Black women in creating culture, right? I mean, even the Maxine thing, the Congresswoman Waters and the April Ryan sort of dust up, you know, the sort of hashtag Black women at work emerged, right? And there was this moment where women were on social media sort of sharing their experiences at work, right? Like, we will make any hashtag trend, whether it's scandal on Thursday nights or Black women at work. And so, you know, how do we actualize that power, like I like to call it cultural organizing, and utilize that within this sort of political space? You know, a few years ago when we started the campaign and we were really focusing on equal pay, we went out to California and sat down with Issa Rae. How many people are watching Insecure? Sat down with Issa Rae at a cafe. The show had just gotten picked up by HBO. We were like, we need to get her right now before she becomes too big for us. And we said, you know, equal pay. Black women are paid 63 cents. At that time, it was 60 cents to every dollar that a white man makes. And she was like, really? I never knew that. We said, yes. Would you be willing to do something with us, some sort of short explainer video? She said, sure. And so we created this sort of short vignette called The Lemonade Stand, where we brought 4 kids together to talk about just basic pay, you know, for a glass of lemonade. We brought in Anika Noni Rose, who some of you might know.
Princess Tiana.
Princess Tiana, Dream Girl. She's the show on BET. And she was one of the actors in the video. And so fast forward to last week on Insecure, where one of the characters, Molly, picks up the check from her white male colleague to see that she was being paid less. And I was like, score, yes! Because 2 years ago, this was not on Issa's radar screen, right? So the opportunity that we have, and sort of back to Ava, because she works very closely with Color Change and others, to connect what's happening in people's everyday lives to people who are in the creative space to help, as Susan Taylor said earlier, to tell stories and utilize other ways of engaging people and educating people on these issues, and then how do we move them to action? As much as we get frustrated about armchair activism and people on the Twitter, as I call it, like, there's power in that, and we haven't quite figured out how to harness the energy to actual change. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity, and Black women are on the cutting edge of sort of driving some of that change.
And I'm always trying to tell people I don't want to give Black women more work to do because we're always doing work, right? When they tell Black women, go run for office. And I'm like, you're giving us more work to do as you are oppressing me. But we know what happens when we run for office. But back to the storytelling piece, and something that Ms. Taylor mentioned on the previous panel, and that we are even disconnected among ourselves. But then when we share our stories, we're not disconnected. The same disrespect that Beyonce gets and everyone is upset about is the same disrespect the mother who is on Medicaid and is a single mother working 3 jobs, has 3 kids below the federal poverty line, she gets the same disrespect. And as we work with storytellers and not just the creatives, and this is why I am so grateful for the women of the CBC, they take those stories to our policymakers. And even if they are the only one on the floor, I mean, I think of Alma Adams shutting down a committee hearing one time, just talking about what it's like for women of color to access health care. Without Black women telling the stories in the positions that we all are in, those stories wouldn't be shared. I think about that in every room that I'm in, whether it's Planned Parenthood or outside, and I know everyone on this panel does too. I have a responsibility here as a Black woman, even if this isn't my necessary experience, I know a Black woman where it is her experience. And how are you going to impact that, whether it's what you're funding, the policy that you're writing, and that collective storytelling. It's also how we got here, right? We are just a storytelling people, but it is so powerful in shaping policy and decisions that are really going to impact all of us collectively.
So we are going to come to you for questions in one moment, but I want to just leave this question to the panel. What is the biggest myth or stereotype about Black women that you would want to dispel? I think for me, as a mom of 3 young women and an amazing husband, I think people sometimes think that you are invincible and that you don't ever feel pain. And that is a myth that we're going to have to blow up. Because I should be entitled to cry and have hurt and be need some time like everybody else. And I don't always know if Black women get that opportunity. So everyone, what is that thing for you?
I think you took mine.
Oh, well, share it.
There's this meme that's going around that says, Black women want to cry every day, but we got stuff to do. Right. We got work to do, right? And then Lovey, she made some edits.
Lovey, who is the New York Times bestselling author of I'm Judging You, Nigeria represent. Okay, go ahead.
But she made a edit to the meme and said, because I was actually about to repost it, because I said, yes, I actually do want to cry all the time, but there is something to do. And she made an edit and said, stop, cry first, and then keep doing your work, as Ms. Taylor said. And I think, we are powerful when a Black woman shows up. It's going to get done. We're going to figure out a way. I tell people all the time, listen, let a Black woman lead you in the right direction. And even if we get lost, I'm going to figure out the best way to get there. But in order for us to lead, we do also need to be vulnerable. And we can be vulnerable. And it's not actually weak to be vulnerable. I think that's actually strong to open up, because that connects us, right? My sister, we may not know each other, but if I share a story with you of something that I've overcome, we will be connected. So I agree that Black women can be vulnerable and can be fragile, and we do experience pain, and yet we still persist. We do persist. Like, that's not new to us, right? We still persist. We get up the next day and keep fighting.
So for me, I think the one that I would say comes to mind, especially right now, sitting on this panel with you all, is that Black women can't get along.
That's true.
I hate that narrative. And if you say that, stop.
Right.
Stop right now. Stop. There are so many, all of you on this panel, Tracy and I, we haven't really gotten a chance to know each other, but we going to. We going to get to know each other. Exactly. But like, Melanie, I think, is the queen of this. Melanie can pull everybody together. And that's one of the things that I love about you. Like, anyone who knows Melanie, she gonna make sure you in the room.
That's true.
But also you, Michelle, like, you pulled this panel together. You text me, you were hitting me like I wasn't getting back fast enough, and you were like, no, you were like, no, ma'am, I need you to be on. And I'm like, okay, yes, I'm gonna do the panel. Just so many women that I think about that I see doing great things that I'm happy for. I want to lift up when Alentia is doing something. My girl Christy, who also works at Planned Parenthood, Felicia, Angela, Steph, like so many of my friends, it's okay. We all get along. We can all be doing great things, and we can all still be supportive of each other.
That's so true. I think the one that sticks to mind over the years is black women are angry, right? And or attitude, and I've come to say, well, if I'm angry, I embrace it, as opposed to feeling like when I walk in a room, I have to figure out how I'm not going to be the angry black woman in the room. If I need to be angry, I'm going to be angry. If I don't need to be, I'm not going to be. And that
Don't make me mad.
Well, the reality is, right. But to channel that into just being able to know that when we walk in rooms where we may be the only one or whatever, to be okay with being able to speak up.
Yes.
And sometimes, you pull yourself back because you don't want to be that. So that's been mine.
So I'm the chair of the board of an organization called Higher Heights, and one of the things that they have this beautiful T-shirt, and on it says "Black Women Lead," and that Black women lead in every aspect of our lives, whether it's our families, our organizations, at work. Like, we are just natural-born leaders, and I believe that it's going to be Black women that lead us out of this very challenging moment. And I think all of the things that everyone has raised on the panel sort of speaks to that, but there's also this challenge of not being able to reclaim our time, not being able to feel like we have to shrink to fit. We have to sort of arise to the occasion, but also figure out how to love one another in that moment. So I'm really excited about continuing to have that conversation and figure out how we support one another in doing that.
All right, let's bring you into the conversation for questions, and Constance will come over, and I see our friend Dara over here.
Good morning, my lovely sisters,
Hi,
everyone
Dara.
out there. I'm Dara Baldwin. I do disability policy. Hey, Sarah. I want to say this is wonderful. I really needed this after this quarter on the Hill. I do disability policy. I am a senior public policy analyst. I do want to bring forth the Black women with disabilities voices and say thank you to my sister Janae for all the work she did about including women with disabilities in the Women's March. That was the first march that was fully accessible to everyone. We really worked hard for that.
And thank you for all of your support. Seriously.
Thank you very much. And I just want to continue to bring that voice and make sure we remember people with disabilities, especially women with disabilities. And you're talking about psychological things. Many of us get onset disabilities, which means you weren't born with your disability, but because of the lives that we live, besides violence and being beat up, as you were saying, walking through streets and hearing shootings. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. Although I went to predominantly white schools, I came home to the ghetto every day, so I was kind of schizophrenic there. My friends were going to school in Rolls Royces, and I was taking a bus back to Newark because my parents was not letting me stay at a white school overnight, right? As a boarding school, I was coming home every day. So I understand that, and I have plenty of friends who did not make it for me. But I just want to say also, in this work, we have to include policy. I am also, and Michelle, I know you from the Hill, and I understand that not only in the staffing on the Hill, but when we go on the Hill, and I do love our CBC, but even in our Congressional Black Caucus offices, right? There are 122 disability rights organizations in DC. I am the only person of color, not Black, of color, Latino, Asian, Native American, who works with this. And I've been doing this since 2009. And I have begged, and Janae knows, I send resume. I said, Janae, let me send your resume to some people. Did you get a phone call? No. So, because they don't want it either. It's by the grace of God that I'm in my job every single day. But anyway, I just want to put that forward. We have to learn the policy procedures because they are killing us on the Hill. When I sat there for the ACA, for these conversations, I think I was the only person of color for women till I called and said, listen here, we talked about the disability side, but you people get here because that language they're talking about over there is going to mess up so much that we have put together.
That's right.
And I just want to say that, we have to learn policy, the rules, the regulations, and be on that Hill.
That's right.
And can I lift up to the women's, and thank you for that, and because we also try to challenge ourselves, and we being women of color at Planned Parenthood, to bring in, all of women of color, whether trans, disability, whatever it is. And I have to give kudos to the Women's March team for having the most intersectional policy platform that we have ever seen. And I have to appreciate the fact that Janae and Tamika and all of them said, if you're an organization that's down with the Women's March, send me your woman of color. Send me your woman of color to this policy table. Yes. And we knew that we have Jacqueline Ayers, who is Planned Parenthood's legislative director. But not every organization, to your point, has that. Right? So people are scrambling and shuffling to do that. And so that is such a powerful
trying to hire interns at the lab.
Exactly.
I'm going to go there.
So we need more black women in policy. Absolutely.
Let me get my young sister here. And
while the mic is coming to her, I also want to lift up that today actually is the Disabled Women's Equal Pay Day as well. So I wanted to lift that up.
Speak that out, please. Yeah.
Hi, my name is, I don't know what this one. My name is Shakir Underdown. I am an intern at the National Disability Rights Network. I actually work under DARE.
Pipeline.
Yes.
There's the pipeline.
With you.
Right.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
So I do have a question because you all discussed the controlling images, which I know Melissa V. Harris Perry discusses in her book, Sister Citizen, the controlling images on black women in the crooked room. Do you see, though, and if you do, can you speak on dispelling the myth of the glass ceiling of sexuality, that sort of emerging controlling image that has, in my opinion, sort of surfaced within the black community itself, especially with black males in entertainment, and how we are shaped such that my sexuality is sort of boxed in and siloed, and I cannot express or enjoy myself as a woman, as a sexual woman.
Ooh, that's some.
Right. Sarah's like with me. Yes.
I want to take a tackle on that one.
I mean, I think it goes back to the whole storytelling aspect, but the question then becomes, who are the storytellers? Right. When you get Ava DuVernay on Oprah's network to be able to talk about the complexities of black folks, like I don't know if you saw the episode of Queen Sugar where they, had the conversation with the trans character, or even. One of the sisters, I can't think of her name, Nova is bisexual, and how they are
fully realized sexual.
Her whole person shows up. So it's important that we have platforms to be able to tell our stories in such a complex way. And, those opportunities are few and far between. So back to our buying power and our Twitter.
Can I add another thing on that? OWN. Queen Sugar is on OWN. Ava is the lead executive producer, but OWN is owned by Oprah Winfrey. So as we're thinking about economics, creating opportunities.
Well, and Ava also employs only women to direct that, right? So that's one example, but that is definitely the exception and not the rule. So the question then becomes, how do we have more opportunities for our folks to tell our stories, and the sort of collective hour, and sort of to your question. And then that takes me back to our activism and our power as a collective to actually push these networks and others to be able to have more opportunities for folks to tell those stories, across race, class, sexual identity, and all of the areas where we're looking to see ourselves.
And I love that now those stories are being told in a normalized way. Right? Like, it's not that there's something wrong with Nova. This is just another part of who she is, and that doesn't take away her credibility as a journalist or activist or the actual backbone of her family, right? It is told, and we're normalizing this. We're not stigmatizing black women for expressing themselves sexually, however it may be. I think Girls Trip, if you haven't seen it, I'm not doing a spoiler, but that was also a piece of the movie of normalizing that. I think it could have gone further beyond just heterosexual relationships, but it is a normalizing sexuality for black women who look like us or who don't look like us or who don't have the jobs that we have or whatever it is. And so that's the power of having black folks, but also especially black women behind the scenes, because, the directors of Girls Trip are getting the accolades, but it was a black woman who wrote that story, right?
So I just want to say that I am so appreciative for everyone in this audience. We had over 200 people who were on the waiting list.
Wow.
I think it speaks to when you design programs, policy, content, you give opportunities for Black women, we show up and out. And so I thank everyone for being here. I thank our allies as they are sitting and appreciating and listening and joining with us. I thank Tracy Sturdivant, Melanie Campbell, Janae Ingram, Alencia Johnson for your dynamism, for everything that you do for every community every day. We got work to do, but we're doing it together. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And check out the report.
And check out the report. Yeah.